John Harvey, it was a very, very exciting event to be at in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, and hats off to you for creating that kind of event. To me, one of the best events I think I've been to in agriculture. It was about connection. It seemed to be about trying to improve connection, which I think is really a theme that's come through all of the presentations this afternoon. Is that the key?
Absolutely. And look, yeah, the answer is just yes. I don't know what more to add. It's so obvious. It's just so obvious, yeah.
What sort of examples were there of connection that you saw in that 2 days?
A whole range of connections. I think probably the one which I thought was the most interesting was some of the international connections. The one that I think really impacted me most was hearing some of the investors and hearing some of the venture capital firms talking about what you'd need to do to be attractive, and then realising that there's no single approach. So angel investors have got very different requirements to boutique investors, to venture capital funds. So really understanding their needs and how you become attractive to them and how is critical. The other one that came through really strongly was just this concept of, we go chasing money, but for most startups, they should actually be chasing customers, not money. If they get customers, they'll get money. So in fact, it might be a bit of a turnaround, and it's actually for a startup is actually to focus more on getting a good customer base. Once you've got a good customer base, people will see it, and that's what will get you the money to take you to the next stage.
Andrew, you said in your presentation that the Minister had already made your last slide outdated because he'd shifted the timeline. Is there a real sense of urgency there as far as he's concerned, as far as we are collectively concerned?
Yeah, I think that the Minister originally asked us to say, well, what sort of system should we have by mid-century? But I think that when he looked at the case for change, the opportunities that exist, and everyone here has been talking about those opportunities, but also the risks, that we need to move a bit more quickly. So the roadmap we have, is flexible, and you just need to move it back a decade or two. That's easier said than done in some respects, because this is a very disaggregated system that we're talking about. It's not as if there is just one organisation that needs to change. There's an entire system, public, private, Commonwealth, state, and so on and so forth. And that's why I think the Minister this morning really talked about the leadership of agricultural innovation, really looking forward to the future, and taking responsibility to help that change start happening now. And we need to start now because the case for change is compelling. The world is changing rapidly. Technology, opportunities, risks are emerging quicker than ever. And that's why I think he said, gee, we need to actually get moving now, and we need to aspire to this system being in place more quickly. So.
Thank you. Now, question up the back, please.
Thank you. And a question to Andrew, but to anyone else who might like to comment. David Dale from Department of Agriculture and Water Resources. My experience is that in research universities there is very little incentive for commercial entrepreneurship or commercialisation. The unis live and die by ERAs times higher education, which are based on ARC, NHMRC grants, and the individual researchers are promoted on the basis of the grants they get, the dollars, their citations, their H-index. The question at last is, are you considering some kind of a commercialisation score or ranking, a comms index or something, that would actually give researchers tangible incentive to see their research delivered to a commercial outcome?
I might respond by saying, firstly, that I don't necessarily agree with everything that you've just said. One of the things that we've found is that there are a lot of sort of sort of common beliefs, and yet the reality when you look at it may be that while there are some aspects of that, certainly we're not talking about that being the only situation. And we've seen many situations of where there is very strong collaboration between universities and RDCs or CSIRO, the sort of collaboration we're seeing in Queensland and Tasmania with the institutes that have been developed between the governments and universities there. I'm also very conscious, just in prefacing my remarks, that the agricultural innovation system and the universities that are part of it is just a sub-part of the broader Australian innovation system, and the issues about incentivisation and reward for research effort I think are changing quite rapidly, and the ARC has recently started changing guidelines around the sort of recognition and reward for research activity that has a commercial outcome. So having said that, I think that the sort of statistics that we've seen here this afternoon about Australia's research effort and our commercialisation and impact, which are more broadly applicable to the community, but which certainly apply in the agricultural sector, are part of that challenge and part of that cause for change. There are many good-minded people who want things to change. We believe that that's one of the many reasons that overall system leadership is required to drive some of these new ways of doing things, the greater collaboration, the commercialisation approach, turning great ideas into really impactful change, all the sort of things that are required. And so buried in the detail of our report, as I've said, I don't necessarily agree with the generality of what you say, but I think it's an area where the future, we hope, could be far stronger than we've had in the past. So.
John, did you want to respond there?
Maybe just a comment, and particularly on the work that EY has done, but I just want to make a comment, and that is that, and it relates to your question, and that is it's very, very easy when you look at what we need to do going forward to say there's a problem in the system's not right, that needs to be fixed before we can do anything, and it's just not true. When you look at, if you look at Dan Winson that I showed you, if you look at Charles, if you look at even just doing Evoke Ag and Grow Ag, if you look at the work that GRDC's done with the Grain Innovate, there are all these steps that we can do which lead us in that direction. And to me, that's the really important thing, is identifying the small steps, the mini steps that we need to make right now towards that vision, rather than waiting for someone to fix the system. It really is going to come down. I think this is what the Minister was saying this morning. It really is going to come down to everybody, wherever you are in an organisation, wherever you are in the innovation system, to actually step up and say, this is what's coming, what do I need to do differently? What do I need to do differently within my organisation to move towards that vision? And if that starts happening in many steps, you'll see an absolute avalanche.
A question down the front in a moment, but I think, Tim, you've got the mic, have you?
I do. Thanks, Lee. Tim Lester from the Council of Rural R&D Corporations. Andrew and Michael, you both touched on this issue of culture, and I think, John, actually, you may have answered my question to a degree. So Richard and John then pulled forward amazing examples of innovation in practice and an innovation culture. So I'm wondering if you can give us some examples of what is it that you actually mean? Where are the problems? And Richard, you may have something you want to draw on that as well from the international one. What is it that we actually need to fix? Because I think it's one of these words that we throw around, but we actually need an example. What is it that needs to change?
Well, yeah, maybe I'll have a go. Thanks for that, Tim. That's an easy one. No, I think there is something that's really the nexus between academia and companies, and it's on both sides. It's not, we're pointing fingers all the time. I think it's a problem that we share, and it's actually interesting. We've got the partnership with the GRDC, and in that partnership we've got 11 Australian postdocs which are over there in Germany working for us. Now, actually, they insisted right from the start, our guys from headquarters, they wanted to have these guys from the universities, and I was thinking, why do they want these guys? They're fresh out of university, never had a job, they can get much better, more experienced scientists and things like that. And it finally dawned on me that in these small teams they have these postdocs because they're at the universities. They don't actually care what research they've done at the universities, but they're at the cutting edge of thinking about the sciences at the time. So they're coming in, a batch of 11 of them, with fresh ideas, new ideas that are coming into the company and are being used by the company to generate further new ideas and things like that. So yeah, somehow or another there's a piece that's not also understood in our commercial companies, including our own local company perhaps, where we're not really milking and pulling out the ideas out of universities and using them in our systems. I don't know if that helps at all.
Can I add, Tim? I think the best examples where we've seen culture change in CSIRO anyway around this focus on innovation is where you bring the customer into the heart of the discussion with the research team. So often we dissociate ourselves from the end user. They're a sort of an anonymous person who we never get to meet and actually hear what their needs are. We take the word from the funder, for example, that this is what their need is. But when you bring the voice of the customer into the room and have research teams actually meet that person and listen directly to what their needs are, that's when the ideas really start flowing. And in fact, that's where you can do some really cool science too, by the way. So there isn't this, I think it's a false dichotomy to say you do innovation or you do research. You can actually do both and one feeds off the other. So I think that's a big part of the innovation culture change, I think. A lot of it's about getting to connect to people and actually understand what their needs are and allowing science to try and meet that need.
And certainly collaboration was something that it was one of those terms that came up, many, many times during those hundreds of discussions that we had. Some people sought to blame some of the ways that we operate. Some people argued that there's a lack of cooperation or collaboration because of the way that funding is obtained or directed or accounted for right across the system. Others believe that there were too many lawyers in the system designed to protect each other's IP, and that the sheer act of trying to collaborate was painful. So without going into a sort of a large amount of detail, because on the other hand you can find those examples of collaboration which are extraordinary and which are very powerful. If you look at page 18 and 19 of the summary report that you've got, we outline a series of values, of behaviours that we thought would be epitomised a truly dynamic and successful innovation system. Passionate people who are ambitious, who bring entrepreneurial thinking, who are dynamic, who are globally differentiated, and who want to work together. Because I think we all instinctively believe that working together is more powerful than just doing our own thing. We have a history of great achievement when we work together. We have many examples of where we haven't worked together well, whether they're in certain CRCs or across various other programs. And a high-level report isn't going to provide the very prescriptive advice as to you must collaborate. It's more about a mindset that we want to find ways to work together because together we're going to succeed.
Now we are out of time, but there's been one very patient person here with the microphone. Would you like, please?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Sarah Sippel from the University of Leipzig in Germany, actually. And I've been very interested in hearing especially your excitement about the collaboration with researchers and universities specifically. But at the same time, there is another actor that I haven't really seen so much in the presentations, which is actually, I think, the farmer itself and himself or herself. And so I guess my question to specifically Michael and John maybe would be, so what's the role of the farmer? How does the farmer fit into these future perspectives?
Michael, do you want to go first?
Well, one of the great strengths of the Australian innovation system is the farmer has a very clear voice through the priority setting system that happens in the RDCs, and that is, I think, one of the wonderful strengths of our Australian system. But I'm sorry if you got the message that the farmers are invisible here, because in fact they're at the heart of all these messages. Really, they're the source of ideas and needs. They play a role in terms of development and testing of technologies on their farms. They provide the opportunity to connect researchers and business more broadly through the industry. Ultimately, for much of what we're doing here, they are the end user we're serving, and so they're at the heart of everything, really.
A final comment, John, or are you happy?
No, only just one final comment on that would be the farmers know the pain points in the business, and so when you look at startups, they are incredibly important. What we're finding, though, is that farmers are actually finding it quite tricky to interact with startups because they're so different to how they're used to interacting with researchers. So that they expect when they get a product and pay money for it that it's going to be brilliant, it's going to work 100%, and when they get one from a startup, it's generally minimum viable product, and it's still got a lot of development to be done on it. And there's quite a bit of actual adaptation required on both the startup and the entrepreneur and the farmer to actually work out a way of doing that partnership. But I agree with Michael, farmer's centre of everything we do.
I might just finally add that those recommendations in our report around regions and around precincts are around farmers at the centre, but with an environment of the universities, the smart researchers, the research corporations, the large companies working together to solve the problems and to create the opportunities. So that whole acknowledgement that while agriculture sits right across our economy and some agriculture happens in urban environments, the vast majority is in regional Australia. So.
And on that note, we are out of time. I'll have to finish the session now, but we've had really 4 very thought-provoking presentations this afternoon from Andrew Metcalfe, Michael Robertson, Richard Dickman and John Harvey. Could you please thank them?